The budget highlights were outlined today by National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ambassador Ukuryatani. As it would be expected in any budget, there were losers and gainers, and of course, there were reactions from different quarters, and the reactions were varied. And let's now come back to the studio, and I'm now joined by Jim McPhee. He's a regular face on KBC. He's a senior lecturer of economics at Strathmore Business School. Hujambo bwana?
Jambo sana.
Karibu sana.
Sawa, asante.
Very good. And next to Jim McPhee, we're joined by Anne Magondu. She's a senior manager tax at Ernst & Young. Thank you, Anne, and karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
Very well. And I want to start with you. What did you pick from Yatani's budget highlights?
Right. Looking at it from maybe a tax perspective, I would say you really tried to balance, because we really didn't see so much of hikes in terms of the taxes we pay. So in my mind, I'm thinking that there is a strategy that now the KRS will take to ensure that the target they have been given of 2.2 billion is achievable. Trillions, yeah, sorry, yeah, it's achievable. Yeah. And
I mean, she's talking about KRS. She's actually ahead of time. KRS is what we know as Kenya Revenue Authority. I mean, the KRA Act is going to be amended so that it's transitioned from an authority to a service. What about you? What did you pick from the budget highlights?
You know, first of all, I was very, very impressed with Honourable Yatani. You know, I think he made a very, very good presentation, and at the end he had a press conference, and I think he was very, very erudite. He really came across as a person who knows what he's doing, and his permanent secretary had the same view. You know, you realise that the economy of the country is in safe hands really at the moment, and we hope that you know, after August it's going to be in safe hands as well. I would agree with Anne. I feel that it was a very moderate thing. All right, we have this increase. It's going to be, obviously, when we talk about excise duty, it could be something like Pepsi-Cola or Coca-Cola. Let's hope it's not going to be on Tusker, okay? But you know, again, we don't know what it is. But I think we've got to understand, actually, you know, one of the concerns that everyone has right at the moment is, you know, what can the government do for the common one-inchy? And I think, you know, we've got to understand that it's beyond the power of the government to do much. You know, at the moment we have this subsidy which has been given by the government for petrol. That's really good. But you see, on April the 20th, 2 years ago, that is almost exactly 2 years from now, West Texas Intermediate was trading at minus $40 a barrel.
Yes.
Because there was so much oil coming across from Saudi Arabia and so on, that, you know, you actually had to pay to get that oil offloaded into the tanks, which were already full. So it then went back to about $40 a barrel. A year ago it was $68 a barrel. I checked the oil price right at this moment. Brent crude is trading at $100 a barrel. So that's the first thing. You've got to remember that everything in Kenya, for example, we import, well, it's difficult to know, because if you look at the numbers given by the CIA, they're meant to know everything in the world, but they don't actually, you know. But the number more or less is, let's say we import 600,000 tons of wheat. It's got to be taken from Mombasa to Nairobi and distributed up country. And also, so number one, it's going to cost us more to do that. KPA has put up their handling charge by 20% just a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. And then also, because of the shortage of vessels on the high seas at the moment, transport costs, bringing, let's say, the wheat, we used to buy a little bit more than 30% of our wheat from Russia, 1.63% from Ukraine. A lot of people say, well, you know, we used to buy our wheat from Ukraine. In fact, we bought very much from Russia. But the problem is, we won't be able to do that now. So we're going to have to pay more for our wheat. It means that it's very difficult. And then we have, you know, the rate of exchange at the moment is 115 shillings and 30 cents to the dollar. So our currency is sliding. The dollar is actually appreciating against all the major currencies in the world, so we shouldn't be worried about that.
Yep.
But it means that the imported item is going to cost us more. And this is where it's very difficult. You know, we can say, well, it's the government doing this. No, it is the international economy which has got us in that particular position.
And no things that is happening out there would definitely have an impact, you know, on the local economy.
Correct.
I'll be coming back to you to understand how much this is likely to complicate Kenya's economic projection of 5.6%, you know, going forward. But I want to hear this from the CS left everyone guessing, probably maybe apart from him, by saying that, you know, some goods are likely to be slapped with a 10% excise duty. He was short of telling people what exactly are things, and he's keeping everyone guessing. What are you guessing? What is your guess telling you?
Well, yeah, I think with the other Kenyans, I might not really read his mind. But looking at what are the products that attract excise duty, we expect so much to go in the drinks. Yeah, likely. But as we say, as he said,
so you're breaking his heart, eh?
Yeah, definitely. Even water, the bottled water, we have excise duty on it.
Exactly.
So we expect that will go up. But maybe just to also talk more on the fuel prices. Yeah, he was so much impressing the people that the government is giving subsidies, but he's not telling us that we are paying tax on it. For me, it's like giving with one hand, you're taking the other. Right now, you're paying VAT. VAT was introduced on our fuel prices back in 2018. Then come 2021, they also increased the tax base for VAT on fuel by including excise duty. Meaning the VAT you're paying right now on your fuel has an element of excise duty. You can imagine the multiplier effect on that. So I would have imagined, or I would have expected that instead of the subsidies, we have the direct impact to the mwananchi pocket, where you tell us VAT has been slashed on fuel and the price goes down. Or LPG again, no VAT. That will have had a direct impact than going through the long chain of the supply chain of the marketers. Yeah.
But if you are to, you know, lower the tax base or the VAT base on fuel and gas, don't you think this is likely to blow the Kenya Revenue Authority a huge tax hole?
Not really, for a fact. Look, we're collecting revenue to spend as a government. Yeah, look at it now from a broader perspective, and I still feel that now KRS also has other avenues to collect more taxes. We talk of numbers. Right now, we're in an election year. We are talking of close to 22 million registered voters. Look at the taxpayers we have in Kenya. They're only 2 million, I think less than 15% of the registered voters. So there's a lot of field that KRA can engage and bring in more revenues. Just imagine if you are to grow that rate from us 15%, and maybe have like 30% of registered voters paying taxes. I mean, even the budget deficit will narrow down.
But I mean,
you know, I would like to pick that up, you know, because I think one of the things, a lot of people are talking about expanding the tax, you know, the tax bracket, and, you know, we want to have more people paying tax. But that's precisely what VAT was all about. When I was working in Ernst & Young, the top rate of income tax in Kenya was 70%.
70?
I remember actually going out to lunch with one of the partners there. I'd done a good job. He gave me a lunch, and I sort of offered to pay the lunch. It was on a restaurant which no longer exists on Koinange Street. But he said, look, you know, KRA are going to pay 70% of this. It's because they will put it in as one of the expenses of the firm. So, you see, our top rate of income tax at the moment is 30%. How can it be 30% when in those days it was 70% because we pay VAT. So VAT is an expenditure tax. So when we're thinking about expanding the tax net, we're already doing that with VAT. And this is where I must say, you know, I feel that, okay, when you buy your petrol here in Nairobi, you're going to pay less than you would in Dar es Salaam, less than you, well, almost the same price in Kigali, in Rwanda, and the petrol has got to go right around the whole of Lake Victoria up to Rwanda. Nowadays it's going through Dar es Salaam because our people in Mombasa are saying, tunataka pumzika hapa, you know, and you know, the problem is this pumzika mentality is getting into the minds of everyone here. But, you know, so you'll pay more in Nairobi than you will in Dar, Kampala, and also even in Kigali. But I think, you know, this is something everyone has got to pay their tax. And so instead of the MPs talking about, you know, well, you got to tax Tom, Dick, and we know, okay, out there, in fact, they're in the tax bracket because the moment they buy anything, anything which is manufactured,
they're paying indirect tax.
Exactly. So I must say, you see, you got to remember, when I was studying for my PhD, I was paying £1.30 for a gallon of a litre of petrol in the UK. Translate that into Kenyan terms. That is almost 200 shillings a litre. So here we are at 134.70. Well, you know, this is the end of the world and so on. Look, those people who are paying that price can well afford to do so.
Well, I'm not sure, but you know, Anne was talking about, you know, she was trying, you know, we were trying to create, to do what we call scenario creation here, and she was talking about one of the things that she expect to see rise in excise duty is water. What else would you guess? Fuel? Do you think fuel is likely?
No, that has been exempted. He said it expressly that petroleum products will be exempt, so that will not go up. But look at the external pressure. What he's just talking about, the pricing, the external price. So when the fuel lands in Mombasa, it will have a higher price, right? Then use that base to calculate taxes. So that again grows, yeah? The same, they will subsidize the marketers, but now looking at the tax calculation way of doing it, inevitably you might find the price going up.
The price going up, the prices of petrol.
Yeah.
I mean, help me understand things. We've seen the Kenya Meteorological Department this evening issue a warning that we are likely to be in a more drier season, you know, despite the fact that we are supposed to be, you know, welcoming or celebrating the long rains. And so this means that we are going to be in an elongated excuse me, drought, you know, going forward. And so this is likely to have a major impact on agriculture. So when the CS talks about an economic growth of 5.6%, where is this growth coming from?
It's going to come from prayers. Because,
right.
You know, I was out yesterday actually because you know, I like planting trees, and I was out watering the trees that I planted. I've got about a dozen trees, and wow, it's so dry out there. And I was talking to a person who runs these flower farms up in Eldoret and also in Nakuru, and even there it's very, very dry. And when I was out yesterday, we had some rain a week ago, and it was quite good rain. And I thought it would sort of be, it was the beginning of the rain, and you know, when the rain starts early, it's normally very good. But boy, we're just back to this drought situation. So that's why I say, you know, let's just hope and pray that we get the rain, because, you know, let's face it, 30% of our GDP in Kenya comes from agriculture.
Yeah.
And you know, we have the price of coffee internationally at the moment. You know, in Brazil, they had, first of all, when they were quite badly hit by COVID, so that really meant that they weren't able to harvest their crop in Brazil. Then they were hit by a frost, and then they were hit by a drought. So, and then now, in fact, in some of the places in Brazil, they've got floods. So the international price of coffee is very good at the moment.
Yep.
Egypt came into the market. They seemed to want to buy a lot of tea in preparation for Ramadan. They had a very big contract that pushed the price of tea up, and so our tea is very, very important. And over in Western Kenya, well, I know some people lost tea because there was a lack of rain. So, that's why we really, this 5.6% depends really on getting that rain for our agriculture. And it's so important for the small man. And if we do get that rain, you see, avocado, Kenya a couple of years ago was the largest avocado exporter in Africa. We were, in fact, ahead of South Africa. Yep. They overtook us again last year. And then also macadamia nuts is a thing which a lot of people are getting into in Kenya. China's actually stopped their import of macadamia nuts from Australia because the Australian politicians are blah, blah, blah against the Chinese. So coal, corn, anything Australian now is just
not welcome in Beijing.
It's not getting, exactly. So we've got to move. The thing is that we're just... Somehow we got to be aware of the fact that all these opportunities are there. So providing we get good rain, we've really got to try to make the most of it,
He's talking about rainfall, and it's true. I mean, when you look at the Kenyan economy, I mean, it's 35%, supported by agriculture.
Correct.
So this also being an election year, and we know for sure that during every election cycle, there's always that boom and bust kind of a cycle. Is this likely to complicate this economic growth going forward?
Likely, and of course I'll join Prof in the prayers that we get the rain, because we need it. He was speaking of trees. I also planted some grass somewhere. Cool. I have to water. We expected rain. It's not coming forth. We need it. We don't have food. So many other things are affected. First of all, you don't even have an energetic citizen to work, right? Then look now at what happens. Food, raw materials for some of the manufacturing plants. So again, they'll maybe be required to import. What does that take our cost of living? Prices again go up, you see? So definitely it will affect the economic growth. Yeah, not forgetting the politics of the day. Yeah, you see, we're trying to get leaders and then proceed with our agenda for the day, and also there's also related cost to it, right? So this again, the amount that maybe would have been used for development is taken for politics. So yeah, there will be a huge dip.
And she's actually now bringing me to the other point, because look, we're going to spend a whole 40 billion shillings on elections, and yet we've allocated 7 billion shillings to subsidize agriculture input. Why have we put our priorities right?
Look, O'Brien, this is exactly why this concept of democracy, there's a Professor Joe Kimura at the University of Nairobi, and I think it was about 9 years ago, he wrote an article and said, look, this thing of democracy is 3,000 years old. I think we better have a look at it again. But this style of democracy that we are brainwashed to buy that organization called the BBC and all the rest of it. We're just brainwashed all the time. Well, democracy, we're democratic, blah, 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 blah. Democracy, that Western form of democracy does not work in the United States, it doesn't work in the UK, and it doesn't work in the whole of Africa. So Professor Joe Kimura is absolutely right. We got to look at this. There's a Professor David Some up in Eldoret. He was very high up in the University of Eldoret. He's a doctor by profession, a lecturer at the university, Moore University in Eldoret. But he got all the elders of the 12 groups in the Kalenjin. They were all sort of squabbling with one another. He got them all together. He got them, now let's work together. That's what we need in Kenya. Forget about this thing called democracy. Democracy is rubbish.
No, You can't say that on screen.
Yes, you know, and we got to tell the Americans to their face, look, you know, don't impose democracy on us.
Let me ask you this, because I can see you are getting worked up. I don't want you to get worked up on screen. But honestly speaking, I mean, what would be the alternative? Because, you know, for such a poor country, you know, to spend 40 billion shillings on an event that will take probably maybe 1 or 2 or 3 days. Anne, what are your feelings on this? Well, what can we do with 40 billion shillings, for example, if it was put into agriculture, for example?
We'll really harvest a lot. We'll, I mean, transform our economy to a very large extent, yeah? And as you rightly put it, in addition to the 40 billion, you may expect petitions, yeah, all over. That now goes to spending time for the judiciary, the lawyers. I mean, it will have such a huge impact in terms of the overall cost to the economy. Yeah, and as he has put it, I mean, we may need to change how we view politics. I know we are a developing country, but we do really admire other developed countries.
You admire which country?
You know, let's not get into so much politics, but of course...
Even the election in the United States was rigged. So,
look, I mean, well, we know that our politics are very expensive because, and of late we have become highly litigious, you know, as a society. When you also throw in the cost of investors who are going to wait and see whether we are going to fight or not,
precisely,
then that is likely to complicate things. And because we are deep in it, how then do we get out of this hole?
By following the advice of Professor Joe Kimura.
That we review our political systems.
Exactly. You know, there was a time when President Mwai Kibaki sent the whole of his cabinet home. Did Kenya collapse? In fact, it worked better than when we had all of those.
It was in 2005.
Correct.
After the banana orange rift.
So the situation there, okay, is, you know, but it's a difficult thing. But what I feel is, I think, you know, you hit the nail on the head, O'Brien. We're spending so much money, and let's face it, you know, if I want to get elected, you know, I remember once in one of the companies where I'm a director, we were interviewing 3 people, and they were so good, these 3 men, that one of them, I remember, I gave him 20 out of 20 in the interview, and we actually employed that man. Now, this is to run the finances of a company. You know, it has 1,000 employees. To run a country, who decides? Here in Nairobi, if I want to be the governor of Nairobi, I won't come and talk to the University of Nairobi and KU and JKU at. Where do I go? Kibera, Mathari Valley, Korogosho slums, Sinai slums. That's where the money is.
Because that's where you have the masses.
Exactly. So who decides who's going to be the next president of Kenya? Is it the people of Nairobi? The people who, you know, the economics department of the University of Nairobi? Are they the people who... I remember 20 years ago I was in Nigeria at the Lagos Business School, and they were going through an election. And these people were saying, you know, these politicians never come and speak to us, you know. And I said, look, first of all, if these politicians come here, they'll speak to 100 people. Not only that, they'll be challenged by 95. You're saying this doesn't make sense. You can go to the slums and you speak to 5,000, and they all, you know, you give them a little thing. Here's our man.
The other thing, I mean, you know, when I get to your point, I mean, it is high time that we sit back, we look at our political processes and ask ourselves,
Absolutely.
I mean, should we be paying these high costs, you know, for our politics? But that's an issue that's supposed to be dealt with by politicians. But let's also look at another thing. I mean, we are going to spend 1.2 trillion shillings on recurrent expenditure, that is paying workers, you know, the per diems and so much.
Well, it's even more than that, actually.
It is actually more than that?
Yeah.
What are your figures telling you?
It's 2 trillion and 174 billion.
Well, on the wage bill?
Sorry, not on wages.
No, I'm talking about...
Oh, okay, wages.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, sorry, I'm talking about the wage bill.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be 1.2 trillion Kenya shillings.
Yeah.
And for a country that is expecting to collect about 2.2 trillion Kenya shillings, whereby 1.2 will go into the recurrent expenditure, and then you have debt repayment of about almost 1 trillion Kenya shillings. What do we really need to do, you know, to bring down, you know, the recurrent expenditure in this country? Because we need to set aside so much for development.
Okay. Well, I think there requires to be a very good guiding framework in terms of revenue expenditure. Because even if you look at it from a household perspective, if you borrow to spend on revenue expenditure, you not grow. You stifle yourself. You cannot have debt on consumables, yeah? So as stakeholders, as Kenyans, this is a wake-up call, yeah? It's all our responsibility to contribute towards managing the rise in the recurrent expenditure. Because we shall not grow. We shall not grow. We have so much development to undertake.
Jim, and I think, you know, I agree with Anne here. When we are spending as a country, and when you look at our recurrent expenditure, I mean, it has grown from, it has actually doubled, you know, in the last 10 years. I remember sometimes in 2012, the government was talking about cutting down the wage bill, which was back then about 600 billion shillings. Now we're talking about 1.2 trillion Kenya shillings. Have we ever taken stock of how much value we generate, okay, by investing 1.2 trillion shillings in the recurrent expenditure?
Well, the answer is no. The answer is no. And you see, it's kama kawaida too, you know, it's, you know. So we got to understand, you know, well, number one, let me just say, you know, in our budget this year, we actually are aiming to have a surplus on recurrent expenditure of 230 billion. But the biggest item of expenditure this year is going to be interest on debt, which is going to be 688 billion shillings.
Interest on
debt. Interest. Not repayment, just purely interest. And that's going to rise to 712 billion next year. And the year after that, it's going to be 758 billion. And the year after that, it's going to be 796 billion. But we hope that the economy is going to grow. And that's, let's face it, you see, that depends on each one of us, actually. Because I think, Anne, you brought up the problem is that the average Kenyan is a thief.
You cannot generalize people.
I'm a thief, Anne is a thief, and O'Brien, if we were talking the truth, you would be a thief as well.
Are you ready to be sued?
I shouldn't have, mate. He was telling us about law in the beginning. So, but you know, this is one thing, because I have past students who start up a hustle, and it's closed down. In this year alone, I've spoken to 2 people. They started up a side hustle. These people were selling their own goods instead of selling this lady's goods, okay? And then at the end of the day, she's paying rent, she's paying them a salary. What have your sales been today? We haven't managed to sell anything. So, you know, that's, and then also another man, he actually has got 60 chickens, and the man looking after them would bring 2 eggs. And he said, well, you know, I don't know what happens with these chickens. They're not laying eggs or something. But anyway, but I think, you see, you know, somehow we've got to get away from our status symbol. I was talking to a man in a company today at noon, and he's actually from Mauritius. He works in a very big bank in Mauritius, okay? And there, the chief executive officer has a driver. He's working in Kenya. All of the senior managers need a driver, so that when I'm going to the KICC, for example, I'm actually driven to the front door, I get out of the left back door, and my driver then goes away with the vehicle to some other place. Now, admittedly, we're giving employment to people by that, but you know, this is something that I know sometimes I'm with Honourable Bunyasi, he's an MP. He's got to have a driver. He's got to have a huge car. Okay, if he isn't, the wananchi watukufu will say this man is bure. You know, let him go home. So we've got to be. We're forced to be big spenders, and then we don't realise that. You know, I try to get people to understand. Look, lights. We got to turn off the lights. Okay. But people, you know, the day begins, the sun is shining into the building, the lights are on. The lights are on to indicate that we're here. But now, wait a minute, we don't even need the lights.
So, Mithis, I also listened to the CS, you know, saying that we are going to invest 400 billion shillings to the devolved unit, what we call the county government.
Yeah.
When you look at the amount of money or the amount of resources that the government or we as a country have deployed to the county government, you know, since the devolution governance, you know, came into force back in the year 2012, 2013, do you believe that we are getting value for this investment?
Well, maybe I would go by 50-50. Yes, 50, no 50. And why I say this is because irrespective of the money going to the counties, you've seen a lot of intervention by the national government. So there could be a likelihood of duplication of the same thing. You see, we already funded you to do ABC, but we still need our assistance in one way or another. Mm-hmm. So I think, we need to get back to the drawing board. I think we need to do an audit of what you've achieved in the last, or rather 10 more years you've been under devolution. Do an audit and see actually what have we achieved. I remember when this issue of devolution came in, the Kenyans were very excited. And you're saying now development is coming to the villages, there'll be jobs here. No, there'll be services, facilities here. But I think we are yet to get there. Mm-hmm. We are yet to get there.
Jim, when you look at our current setup of two-tier government, whereby you have the county government, you have the national government, and every year the government or more billions of shillings, are deployed to the county government, to help in service delivery, to help in poverty alleviation and so much, to help in job creation and so much. Would you say that we have gotten value for our investment in counties?
Well, let me ask you a question. I know you're asking me a question, but let me ask you a question. Mm-hmm. Who was the person who held up this new constitution that we have on August the 10th, 2010, was it?
It was the former president, Mwai Kibaki.
And at one stage, he had sent all of his ministers home.
In 2005.
And we now have 2,500 MCAs. If we had a Senate the size of the United States Senate, we would have 1/5 of the number. We have 47 counties, 47 governments, okay? 47 groups of people who sit there getting a salary which is much better than any person working at the University of Nairobi, okay? You have a governor, you have,
a deputy.
All of this, a deputy, etc. And then we have
county executive committee members.
We have now 349 members of parliament as opposed to our 200. Now, Mr. Honourable Kibaki, is there a possibility that you've gone wrong? Because I asked myself, I remember...
Well, that was not Kibaki's document. It was a document that was voted by Kenyans through a referendum,
yeah,
right?
Because... And who are the Kenyans? Korogosho, Mathari Valley.
Well, I'm sure if you went to Muthaiga as well, there were people there who voted
yeah,
for
but
the
look, the people in Muthaiga were probably drinking champagne when people were voting. So, but now, why I say this actually is that there's Professor Ruth Kiraka, who's done a study with a team of people from Strathmore Business School, and they've spoken to the women in the counties. They are unhappy. They are just totally unhappy with the county governments because the amount of nepotism there is incredible. And, you're meant to give government to the people so that, if I don't like what's going on, I'm going to come and tell you because you're right here. You're not sitting in Nairobi in an office in, opposite Parliament. But is that the reality on the ground? Because, an economist is not a guy who reads a book and gets a first-class honours degree at the University of Nairobi, which, some of us have got, okay, and, those are clever people. But that clever people wrote teach, okay, increase the price of Senator beer from 20 shillings a glass to 40 shillings, and it almost killed that particular liquor. So, these are people who have I've got a first-class honours from the London School of Economics. Well, you don't know what you're talking about, because you do something, what you say and what you do are two different things.
So, because here we are, we are deep in it, and I was just going through the Commission for Revenue Allocation, the report, and it has always complained about that. Look, the investment in terms of the capital investment at the county government, at the county level, is less than 10% of what they are given, and yet they are supposed to be 35%. So how do we then make county government engines of growth going forward?
Wow, that's not an easy question to answer, because it all depends with the team that takes over the county as leaders, yeah. And just as what Prof has said, yeah, look at how these people come to the office. They come with numbers, my people, you see, my people. So the issue of development might be left to the periphery to impress my people. You find maybe you hire the whole clan to pay back. You get me? Yeah. So the structure maybe has to change. The numbers are huge. The people who are manning our counties are so many. I think we need to reduce those offices, because within a village you'll find, I would say, a semi-god as a county representative somehow. Instead of delivering the service, they want to take the seat to be served, right? So we really have a challenge. This has to change. And I think mindset again of the leaders, we who are vying to become our leaders, they need to look at the larger good for everyone, including the young ones who don't even know what is happening right now in our country. Because in the few years to come, they'll be grown-ups and they'll get into problems we are facing.
Very well.
Yeah.
Because in the interest of time, we have to put this, we have to stop at some point. But I also want to hear from you. Amending the Insurance Act, to force border riders or border owners, to buy insurance covers for their passengers, for such an industry that operates with no regulations. How are we going to enforce this? And is that a right move from the National Treasury?
Well, I think, you brought up a very good point, because, if you're going to introduce a law, how are you going to make sure that that law is obeyed? And, let's be practical about it. Are you going to have the police? I always feel that the work of the police is to keep the traffic moving. And very often, they do exactly the opposite. Okay, and one of the reasons why Uganda a couple of months ago actually imported more goods through Tanzania than through Kenya, and we've got to remember we can lose our position very, very easily, is because of the number of police who are working on the northern corridors, they call it, okay, from Mombasa through to Kampala. So, to my mind, this is just going to enable the police to have another thing that they can hold over the border riders. And my own experience is, the police have control over cars, they don't have control over border riders. And, So
would that regulation be easy to implement?
No. The answer is no. And what is the result of it? The result is, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? I know I used to ride a motorbike when I was young, and I had to have insurance, but that was for myself. But maybe, you know, if I want to have insurance for my motorbike, what I've got to do is I've got to actually, at that point, the insurance companies have got to say, okay, well, look, you have to have insurance, and you've got to display it on your motorbike. And when you get that insurance, you've got to pay for the insurance of a passenger. The only problem is that, you know, let's face it, the border riders, they live from hand to mouth. You know, they get money, they don't get a lot in a day. It may be enough to feed them for that day and look after their family. You know, for them to pay out, let's say 1,000 shillings, 2,000 shillings, or even more, it's going to be very, very difficult for them. And let's hope it doesn't kill the industry.
Well, Anne, I also want to hear from you, because I know you're a tax expert. How do you implement such, you know, a policy in a highly unregulated market like the border industry?
Well, it will not be a walk in the park. It is hard, and as he has rightly put it, yeah, these are people who collect 50 shillings, maximum maybe 100. I don't know how many trips in a day. The day they are not well or something happens, they'll not be doing the business. So if you put a fixed kind of premium that they should pay without taking into consideration the other factors that are affecting the operations, I think it is, I would say it is not still well thought out. There needs to be a lot of consultation. There are many, they are all over. Today I might have a bike, and then my brother is like, give me the bike today, I ride. Who is insured? Who is the insured person here? How do you regulate this? Yeah.
And then the other thing, I mean, the insurance industry in Kenya, I mean, is highly risk averse. And we all know about the borders in this country. Do we have insurance companies who will be willing to offer premiums to borders?
Well, that's another aspect of it, probably no. So the answer is, you know, it's a thing which is very easy. You know, it's rather like I do some work with a very, very clever man, Kimani, and he, you know, in a meeting we were having with a particular company, he said, well, okay, look, you know, this is okay, this is according to the textbook, but now what's going to happen in practice? And the answer is something very different. So how do you enforce this in practice? You got to have someone other than a textbook owner to actually think through the process to see how this is going to be done. And I think it's going to be very, very difficult to, you know, to actually enforce that. So again, you know, just as, you know, Honourable Rotich a number of years ago, he said, look, are we going to raise 6 billion shillings from a senator? He never raised that money because he killed the industry. Finally, because we have to wind up, if you were Ukuryatani, would you have done it differently? Well, you know, he did a very, very good job. First of all, I think he presented it much better than I would present it. And, you know, because I would probably get fired up halfway through the budget and start speaking loudly. And someone recently said, you know, I saw you on TV, but, you know, you were very, very angry. So, but, you know, put it this way, it's a very difficult job to do. Because, you know, on the one hand, I think, you know, many of the people in Parliament were saying this is a budget for the rich people. There was one of the MPs saying, look, this is a budget for the rich people. But, you know, it isn't. In fact, it's very difficult to be totally balanced in that budget. Very good. Anne, yes. Any other comments?
Oh, if I were Ukur, I would say it came out very well with a lot of assurance to the Kenyans that we are still on course on the Big Four agenda, and also assuring the Kenyans that there will be a way to tame the expenditure. Of course, that is on paper. We are waiting to see it being actualized. From a tax perspective, I stated earlier, well balanced, and we are hoping that the Kenya Revenue Authority will now leverage what they have right now, and we've seen them doing that in terms of leveraging technology and iTax to net more taxpayers. Very good. Yeah. Thank you, Anne, for joining us here, and of course, Jim McPhee. Thank you for having us. Very good. Anne Magondu is a senior tax
Senior Manager Tax at Ernst & Young, and Jim McPhee is a lecturer at is a senior lecturer at Strathmore Business School, joining us tonight to help us make sense of Yatani's budget billions. You're watching the Prime Edition live from Broadcasting House. We are taking a short break, and thereafter